Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast, where we explore the mindset, skill set, and habit set of leadership communication. Using these tips, techniques, and tactics, you'll be able to talk like a leader to build better relationships and get more done. Your host is Guy Harris, who has more than 20 years of combined professional and military experience in consulting, coaching, and training in areas like team and interaction dynamics, communication strategies and tactics, as well as emotional intelligence. Take it away, Guy.
Hi, this is Guy Harris. Welcome to the Talk Like a Leader podcast. This week's episode is titled Using Stories to Coach with Impact. Let me start back when I first began this journey to become a coach, trainer, public speaker. This journey basically starts in the summer of 2001, give or take a little bit. So approximately 20 years ago. And I had just come out of a more corporate or business management environment where I was leading teams directly, led teams in more informal ways since then, but it was a very structured way then. And I left an environment where, at a minimal level, I could tell people what to do and they would do it. At minimal level. Didn't necessarily get great buy-in, didn't necessarily get great enthusiasm. It would get results. And from that environment, I went into the speaking, training, coaching world where connection with people is really, frankly, less structured. It depends more on credibility and believability than on position. And I go into, mostly at the time, classroom environments where there are maybe 15 to 25 people that I have not met before the day that the class begins in most cases, and trying to convey lessons I've learned in my life to that point about leadership and communication styles, communication approaches, coaching approaches, those kinds of things. And I had experience. I had done lots of reading. I had listened to lots of programs, even more experience in learning programs and books since then. And even at the time, I had been doing leadership kind of work and coaching team members for a while. So I had experiences that I felt like they were relevant to share with people. And I tended to approach the classroom environment with basically telling people the lessons I had learned rather than sharing with people how I had learned the lessons. And what I noticed, some of the early classes I had were okay. I would get, actually, frankly, quite a bit of pushback on ideas. I would get resistant class members. I would get people openly challenging me in classes, and I hate to admit it, there were times I would actually get into what an outside observer might call an argument with a member of the class. Frankly, it didn't go very well. And over time, I started learning the art of storytelling, of learning how to tell people how I had learned the lesson more than just the lesson I had learned. I started understanding the importance of connecting with people on an emotional level, even more than connecting with people on a factual level. And that didn't mean that I wasn't prepared to back up the experience with survey data or sociological or behavioral analysis studies or quotes from books that I had read. I was still prepared to do that. I just started getting better at telling how I had learned what I learned, like an experience I had, or someplace where I'd failed in doing something well. Sometimes it was where I was successful. Often the story started with how I had messed something up and what I learned from messing it up. And the thing I noticed in that journey, this wasn't a single event, not a single day. This experience, this journey actually played out over years, frankly. And as I got better at telling stories, I started noticing that people in classes resisted me less. People were more engaged. People left the day more enthusiastic and more hopeful that they could do the things we talked about. I noticed that the reviews of the classes got better and just generally had a better experience with people in the room. And so from that, what I learned is that telling people how you learned something, either the struggle you went through to learn the thing or the things you read, the information you accumulated it through. So I've heard Russell Brunson, he's a really master storyteller in the marketing world, use the phrase, tell people how you earned the knowledge you have or how you learned the knowledge you have. So the experience that gave you the knowledge, or the learning journey, the things you read in the classes you went to that helped you learn it, so that you can share with people the emotional journey to get the experience, not just the facts of the experience or the facts of the learning. And what I've noticed is the better I get at that, the better people get the idea I'm trying to convey. The less it positions me as the know-it-all and more as the person who's walking with the person in the journey of learning. And I've heard it said that most people don't want to hear the sage from the stage. They want to hear the guide on the side. And so what's that got to do with coaching with impact, using stories to coach with impact? Well, I'm going to suggest that coaching people is kind of like training. It's not exactly the same as training, although there's a similar situation. There's a parallel experience. But as we come along our team members and help them learn how to approach things in a new way, take on new skills, try new approaches, those kinds of things, experiment with different behaviors in the workplace or different ways of doing things, it's kind of like training. Not exactly like training, kind of like training. And in the same way that a classroom environment depends on people buying into the journey on an emotional level before they buy the facts, I suspect you'll find that as you coach your employees, they're going to buy in better at an emotional level if they understand the journey you went through to learn what you now know today. And stories really rely on one of the three sources of feedback power. It's something that Kevin Eichenberry and I talk about in our Bud to Boss workshops. We say that the three things that you have going for you in providing feedback to or for another person is your position relative to them. So if you have position relative to them, they're not surprised when you give them feedback. It's just not super helpful, tends to be kind of negative. There's your perceived expertise, what they believe you know. And what I'm conveying here is a way to demonstrate that you know things in a way that people will buy it rather than just think you're saying I'm a know-it-all. And then there's your relationship with the person. It's the nature and quality of the relationship. The relationship is really the idea that people trust your intent, that they're willing to listen to you because they believe you're trying to help them. I think actually stories will help that too. The primary thing that stories help with is expertise. It demonstrates expertise. It demonstrates the journey you went through to learn the thing you know today and how it's going to help that person. And by the way, when you show how it helps the person, it kind of bolsters the relationship source also. But here's the point. The better you get at telling stories, the better you get at sharing with people how you learned what you know or how you earned the knowledge that you have today, the more likely they are to buy into it and the more likely they are to act on it. So if you can learn to tell stories and you can share your experiences with people, not just your knowledge, you can use stories to coach with impact. And when you learn how to use stories to coach with impact, you can talk like a leader. This has been the Talk Like a Leader podcast. You can listen to this show every week wherever you get your podcast. If you haven't, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. I'm Guy Harris, and thanks for listening.